I want to welcome everyone. I also want to thank Oma, and I want to thank Derek for inviting me. First of all, hi Derek, and also for their leadership in having these kinds of discussions. And what I'm going to do is mostly for this, really have a discussion about dissemination. And by dissemination, I'm broadening the definition of dissemination to just to talk about any opportunities we have to get our music to the ears of listeners and to get what we have to share to audiences, whether it be via any one of a number of channels. So I want to say that I don't want, such experienced folk to be sitting there and for me to be a talking head. At the end of the day, between us all, we have a lot of information to share. I see folks like Ken Whiteley. I love your beard, Ken. I'm almost envious, man. And Jaco, and there's good. We're going to have a great discussion. And so I want to say that as we're going through these particular items, I've put a little presentation together, but please feel free to stop, interject, if there's a points that need to be clarified or, things that you want to add uh, vis-a-vis your own experiences, et cetera, and so on. So please do. I want it to be a lively discussion, as I said, and not necessarily just be a talking head. I'm going to share my screen. First of all, just give me a nod. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. Yes, yes, beautiful, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen with you. All right. Oops. Slideshow. Everybody seeing my screen okay? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, beautiful. So this is putting it out there, disseminating your music. Um, it's an Adinkra Farm presentation. Adinkra Farm is apart from being where I reside, it's also the name of the company that has been founded by myself and my wife, Janelle. And we talk about a lot of different topics. A lot of what we do is sort of small business and that sort of thing. But, where I have an opportunity to have a discourse on music and, you know, is right up my alley, of course, because as you know, music is my passion and my lifelong journey. So where the two intersect is especially one of my favorite places. Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this today. All right. So I also want to say that this is presented by the Toronto Blues Society, which of course I believe you probably know already.
Narrator is Rudi Williams.
Sorry, say that again.
Half of the Toronto Blues Society.
Sorry, just say who you are. Oh, is it Rick? Sorry, go ahead, Rick. I didn't hear you properly.
No, it's fine. I'm taping and I was just naming your name. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay, okay. Sure, sure, sure. So I might do that for you then. My name is Rudi Quammie Williams. Most people probably know me as Quammie, and I am a musician, business consultant, and a real lover of community. Okay, this is presented by the Toronto Blues Society. Okay, so before we go into our presentation, let's just kind of define some of the terms that, at least the ones that are significant for us to consider. So dissemination will mean the diverse actions, principles, the strategies that are implemented to have an artist's musical products or music heard or consumed by audiences. The dissemination mix is what I'm going to call the choice of methods used in a complementary manner by artists to have their musical products, etc., heard or consumed by audiences. So some examples of dissemination are gigging, touring, live streaming, self-produced streaming, house concerts, radio play, online sales, downloads, etc. These are all particular effective ways in which we as musicians have our music heard or consumed by audiences. I'm going to describe penetration as the degree to which your music or your musical products are being consumed by audiences. These definitions are not newer, but I just wanted to make sure that we're kind of on the same page in terms of what I'm considering. The brand we're going to talk about as a promise, the expectation that your audience or your potential audience will perceive when your name, your image, your music, etc., reaches them. Brand can be influenced by communications, marketing, people association, image, in-person experiences, and as a saleable property, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, as a saleable property, brand is really a combination of trademarks rights and the right of likeness or celebrity. So in other words, we will, in order to sell that expectation, the potential that is wrapped up in when somebody sees us or sees our name or sees our trademark, in other words, that mark that has been created to represent us. A lot of companies have trademarks, as we know, but more and more artists have trademarks as well. And in the world that we're in today, the combination of the trademark rights, the rights of the persons to use the person's likeness or their celebrity status or their position within a particular genre, etc., all of these things can be wrapped up into what we call brand. Subscriptions will be a benefit purchased from an arts producer for a number of products and services to be accessed in the future. So, I pay my money, and with that, I anticipate that I'm going to get X amount of services in the future, or X amount of products, or maybe a combination of the two. Often added to this are privileges that might be unique to the person who purchased the subscription, called subscribers. Such as newsletters, the first choice of products. When I release my music, my subscribers are going to get an opportunity to purchase it first or to hear it first. Or when I do my testing, I'll do it with my loyal fan base of subscribers and so on. Or there may be added benefits or rights. And diversifying revenue streams. This is a really important concept because it, in a sense, is one of the underpinnings of my discussion today. Ensuring that sources of revenue for us as artists are independent and unrelated. And now, most of the time, they are related in some ways, our revenue streams. But what we do want to do is have revenue streams that are not solely dependent on each other. Because where you have a catastrophe, if you like, or a change in the landscape that affects one area, if they're all really interrelated, then what happens is that it poses a risk, a financial risk, and we're seeing that now happen with many of the folks in our performing community, in our composers, musicians, et cetera, where there's a shift that's going on. The pandemic certainly didn't help. It, in fact, exacerbated that shift by removing the ability for revenue, for interaction, for the motivation, for the that which we get from being in front of an audience, et cetera, that spurs our creativity and so on. The pandemic decimated that now for some time. And so it also posed for a lot of people, in addition to the emotional, social outcome from that, it also poses a financial risk for a lot of people. A lot of my friends are considering, my musician friends, I mean, are considering not really looking to music as their full-time source of revenue anymore and are looking to try and do other things. In this discussion, I'm going to try to propose that there are some avenues and some ways to look at and perceive what is going on, especially with regards to how we disseminate our musical products. I'm going to look at, how we might, what I do would call diversify our revenue stream. Okay, the objectives for our presentation today and our discussion will be to discuss opportunities for disseminating your musical products, to expand knowledge of diverse dissemination strategies, to explore strategies for evolving your dissemination mix, to provide a foundation for decisions regarding that dissemination mix, and to explore the principle of reducing financial risk by diversifying revenue streams. So before I proceed, are there any questions or any comments, etc.? I will stop periodically through the presentation and do this. So let me know what you're thinking. Are there any questions? Anything I can clarify about what I just said? Just unmute yourself and all right. Okay. So first ability area of dissemination that I like to discuss is probably the most traditional one and the one that, in fact, in many ways have defined our musical practice for the most part, which is gigging, right? Most artists I know started off, their first aim was really to get in front of an audience, whether it be on a stage at a club, whether it be starting off on the street corner or whatever. I mean, in a sense, this area has been a lot of the driving force behind what has created several generations of musicians, which is the emphasis on gigging, the emphasis on getting in front of an audience. And so for the most part, until February of last year, a significant source of musician revenue has been from gigging. Gigging helps us to develop localized, loyal following that we could turn into a fan base. It's a cost-effective means of generating revenue because to get to the gig, especially if the gig is localized and is in your own area. Sorry, did you have a comment? Okay, remember to mute yourself if you're not if you're not speaking, right? That way we'll keep the background noise down a bit. Just everybody put themselves on mute. When you want to speak, just unmute, and then when you're done, go back to being on mute, okay? All right. So as I was saying, gigging has been, in a sense, cost-effective revenue generation because what is required to gig in your local vicinity, it doesn't require, a huge amount of transportation, accommodation costs, and all of those things as we would if we were on tour. It could be done, especially I myself, and I know many people have had arrangements with local venues where they were a fixture, if you'd like, and that for many people helped them to build audience, to develop that loyal following, to be able to know that there was some guaranteed revenue from performing, a chance to try out and refine new material, to create brand development opportunities, and some opportunities to expand their audience. Although, you know, if the venue is small, there's a limit on who can be in there. It also presents live streaming opportunities, the ability to live stream from the gig, allows us to showcase talent. Agents, managers, etc., played role as facilitators. I'm not going to get too much into agents, managers, and so on in this particular presentation, because that's going to be in one of the future, on one of the next Sundays that we do. We'll focus on those people. And then, you know, post the pandemic, we all have a big question mark. I could have easily put up a big question mark over that said, look, you know, none of us really know for sure what this landscape is going to be, what gigging is going to be like post the pandemic. Do we get back to eventually having the ability to be in front of our audiences, as many of us have built our careers on, or to what degree, is that going to be affected? So these are all things that, you know, we have to keep in mind.
And my camera's not working.
The person with phone number ending 4740, just, yeah, thanks, you did it, okay. Yeah, so these are all things that I'm sure that everyone is contemplating with a degree of unsurety. But one of the reasons that I wanted to take this approach to dissemination is that I believe that we can mitigate our risk by looking at ways that we can do what I call diversify our dissemination mix, increasing our ability to gain revenue from a number of areas, and thereby mitigating the risk of, for example, a sole reliance on gigging in front of a live audience at local venues and so on. I think most of us will probably feel and agree that, especially if you're from the generation of music as a craft, as a well-studied, time invested, and investment of, you know, skills and so on, we did that to really be in front of audiences for the most part. And for some of us, to make really quality records, etc. But as we move into the times that we are now, which are unsure, it is questionable where gigging will fall into the mix of musician and artists and composers endeavors as we move forward. Okay, so just wanted to start with gigging. Touring also, I see as an extension of gigging. You know, it's kind of gigging on a much broader scale, or maybe gigging that takes you to other countries, other venues, allows for there to be an expansion of the market for your live product. And I also want to mention that, you know, there has to be the understanding that in the ultimate mix, many of these opportunities have to work together in tandem. Okay, so touring provides an opportunity to refine stagecraft, musicianship, expands the market for your live musical product, increase promotional opportunities and fan loyalty, help to build brand, develop audience, is an excellent marketing tool, increase merchandising opportunities. Financial tour planning is extremely necessary because, you know, I come from a generation where many of us, and I could say this from firsthand experience, where many of us, being very excited to be out in front of the audiences, to get across the country or get across the world in some cases, to perform our music, etc., didn't necessarily look at how we financially plan that tour. So some of us were off on tours that weren't going to actually make us a living in the first place. Now, it's not necessarily that you don't want to do a tour if it is not going to be profitable. If in fact you have a good understanding of why you're doing that tour, what is it going to bring you? Because there may be what you lose out in terms of the tour, you may gain in terms of profitability in other ways, like merchandising, after the fact, streaming, and so and so. But I always say that, one of the things, I won't go into too much detail, but one of the things that is extremely important for artists and their management, their etc., is to do financial planning for a tour. Financial planning for your tour, as financial planning should exist for, for all of your endeavors. What are we putting in terms of inputs? What is the cost? What are the costs of those inputs? What are we looking to derive from it, so that we can plan properly and that their expectations, our expectations can be met with regards to what our financial expectations are. If we don't plan for it, then we basically plan to fail at it. So as I say, I can't stress that enough, that financial planning for every tour, etc., is extremely important. Also, tours now are increasing live streaming potential because the ability to stream concerts where there's good audience, good systems, good technology that allows us to be able to record properly and so on, and to then have another life as a live streaming project, or even streaming after the fact and so on. So YouTube touring provides some of those opportunities. Again, we all are going to be having a big question mark over post the pandemic. What does touring look like? Many of us hope to get back to to where this will be a part of our mix, because it was a substantial part of most musicians' revenue. However, we have to be prepared for if that's not the case. Okay, I couldn't find some up-to-date statistics that breaks down the average musician's sort of monetary sources. This is an American one, but essentially, it shows some interesting trends that also has implications for us in Canada, to talk about how we navigate the challenges of live performance, the live performance model that defined our industry, while simultaneously moving towards a paradigm in which recorded music, sorry, go back there. Yeah, okay, got cut off. Okay, yeah, so I was gonna say that moving towards a paradigm in which recorded music as a commodity is now in a situation where, one, audiences are being encouraged more and more to want it for free, while at the same time, the idea of the music itself being the product is morphing into a new paradigm shift, where something called the brand is perhaps just as significant as the musical product itself, and in some cases, more so. All right, so revenues from gigging and touring. I'm just gonna break them down here. So there are performance fees and the fees for recording. There's merchandising revenue, endorsements, sponsorships. Many people are bundling albums and other merchandise with the purchase of concert tickets, for example. There's royalties, sales, streaming, third-party revenue, and then the promoters' revenue, ticket sales, merchandising, parking, concessions, sponsorships, brand partnerships, etc., all from the gigging and touring. And then the next thing I want to talk about is subscriptions and self-produced streaming. Subscriptions create opportunities for fan engagement. Okay, sorry. Create opportunities for fan engagement to continue. Revenue generation opportunities. Subscription and self-produced streaming can be tied with brand building and merchandising strategies. There's an opportunity to creatively increase added value. Newsletters, customized product offerings, collaborations, curation. We can reward loyalty, for those fans who stick with us and come on board with regards to our subscriptions. We can give them the first opportunity to receive new products, etc. Audience preparation for returning to gigging and touring. So this is a significant opportunity, I think, where we should be thinking about using some of these opportunities like self-produced streaming, subscriptions, etc., to prepare our audiences for when we do, and if we do, return to gigging and touring as a significant dissemination opportunity, right? So I said earlier that many of these should be viewed as actually symbiotic. In other words, they are helping each other if we use the mix properly. There's a growth in the availability of supportive platforms to sustain our attempts at self-produced streaming and subscriptions, etc. And there is, of course, going to be a need for investment in equipment and tech support for some people if they have never, for example, produced concerts from their own living room or their own studios, etc. Subscription and self-produced streaming revenues. There's the revenues that come from the subscription fees themselves, merchandising revenues, endorsements, sponsorships, the bundling of albums and other merchandise with the purchase of a subscription, royalties, sales, streaming, third-party, licensing, YouTube, other social media channels, sponsored posts on various social media outlets, and then sponsor revenue, merchandising, and brand partnerships. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about, sorry, Derek, go ahead.
Yeah. I threw something in the chat, but I also see that Ken has his hand up. My question, and I saw Ken commenting about revenue streams a moment ago, was about subscriptions. It's not a word I am clear on, so I assume in part it's like your fan base who are followers from social media tools, because otherwise it would be like a membership in your fan club. Just can you elaborate on that, and maybe Ken can jump in and.
For sure. I'm just going to go back to that slide. So when Ken, let me just maybe tackle both at the same time. What was Ken's question or comment?
I've got a couple of questions actually.
Okay, well, why don't we just stop here for a bit and then let's kind of address
sure
that discussion.
I mean, I thought that slide about the revenue streams in the American musicians, it obviously, or it looked to me like it had been averaged over a lot of different people.
Yes.
And I suspect for most of us watching today, for example, as Ted Peters said, yeah, record company advances. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Doesn't really apply to most of us. I mean,
right.
I do know some people who've had that for sure, but it's not the norm here. I mean, just to say that there are, I don't know if you want to put that slide back up or how much it's worthwhile talking about it, but But I guess a lot of what you're saying here is that things are premised on having, a variety of streams that are not, like, if your only source of income is the things which spin off of gigging and touring, such as record sales, but you're not filing your SOCAN forms, and so you're not getting songwriting royalties, et cetera, et cetera. That there's more ways to generate revenue from things that things that you maybe already are doing.
Yeah.
But I thought that actual thing, because I don't know anybody who's making a lot of money off ringtones, but some people are making a lot of money off ringtones that is skewing that, throwing that $500 figure in, so.
Yeah. So Ken, perhaps if I can just, that's why, you see where I said the revenue sources from the average musician, and I put average musician in quotation marks, because it's not really, this is not scientifically, I wouldn't use this slide to be a scientific data representation of what the average musician is, because as you pointed out, like how many of us are getting record label advances, right? Canada.
But a question about what you were just more recent thing that you were talking about a couple of slides later, where you're talking about revenues from YouTube, and that requires basically allowing YouTube to sell ads for your for what you put up, for the content you create.
Yes.
And put up, you allow YouTube to put up ads on your content.
Yeah. So what I'm proposing here, Ken, is that this is really just an opportunity to look at some of the revenue generating opportunities and where they may fall in terms of in the total revenues that are earned by musicians. I couldn't find this kind of data for Canada just yet.
Sure.
I think that as we move forward, we're gonna push for more and more data collection in terms of our industry here in Canada, and we'll get to have a better idea of these things. So while, as I said, this particular approach doesn't necessarily mirror Canada, but what it does do is give us a good indication of the trends, right?
Sure.
In terms of where we're headed, because as many of us know, this list of monetary possibilities are not what we considered even so much as a decade ago.
Sure.
Some of it perhaps, but many of it not at all. So my point here is that the environment and the opportunity to be sustainable in it is changing very, very rapidly. And my passion is for the people who have spent an enormous amount of energy learning their craft, and in fact, who are at some cultural icons in some cases, but also to people who want to keep alive this rich cultural heritage of music that we as human beings in Canada have created, that tells who we are in a sense. I believe that we need to learn how to diversify, because it makes good business sense. And when I say good business sense, most musicians and artists that I know don't have any aspirations of being like gazillionaires. Most of them really just want to make a living and be able to get their art and get the things that they're producing out to the audiences who can appreciate them, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm saying that whereas before, we used to be able to do this by just playing the right venue and being on the right tour circuit, et cetera, that is changing rapidly. And so there's a number of other means of disseminating our musical products, and we need to know what they are, and we need to see how to consider them and what mix may make sense for us.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Sorry, Derek, let's go back to what your comment was.
Yeah, and there's been a few comments thrown into the chat that are addressing or providing answers, because Bandcamp and GoFundMe were identified, but it might be a better one, and maybe you can comment on which of these three. Patreon, I actually referred to Canada Helps incorrectly and calling it Canada Gives, which TBS uses. Patreon, Bandcamp, and GoFundMe. Would you consider them appropriate or falling into what you're talking about in terms of subscription?
Patreon is probably the closest to what I'm talking about in terms of subscription. GoFundMe is not a subscription. It's a how would I call it? It's a
Campaign.
It's more in the area of fundraising, right? Now, mind you, the line gets blurred a lot, but I would still say that GoFundMe is in the area of fundraising, right? Where people artists get to fundraise, and their fans or their loyal base or whatever will support them, or other people who hear about what they want to do may support them in that. I mean, you can have a GoFundMe for many, many different things. You know, I know a young man who had a GoFundMe because he wanted to produce a photography book on crystals, right? And was immensely successful. And then figured out, you know, what do I need to give to all those people who supported me and so on. So, but I would the approach of GoFundMe has really been fundraising. But Patreon could be, I guess, considered a little bit closer to what might be a subscription, because at the end of the day, it's really about building relationships. And I also want to say that, you know, sometimes we have to look at the terms and understand their origins. So if you remember that in the theater world, right, the let's say independent theater in Canada, or theater on the whole, what used to happen? People who were sort of considered as part of the sort of close audience circle and supporting the theater, right, would be offered a subscription, and that would allow them to year after year, as long as they paid their subscription fees, they would get like a bundle that might include, you know, tickets to 3 of the main productions and that. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure. And it's not dissimilar to the sort of Massey Hall has a gold circle or
yes, exactly.
American Express.
Exactly. So that is the origin that has been now pulled into the circle of music, right? With perhaps a little bit of, you know, change in the overall how it's going to take place, but essentially that's the foundation of it. The foundation of it is that I have an inner circle of audience or loyal fans, etc., who I'm going to offer the opportunity to have some privileges. And here's the key. The key is that they're paying me in advance for those things that they're going to have. Right? If you see how this is possible to evolve and how it fits into our ability to generate a loyal fan base, to be able to give them some privilege in terms of what the regular public may not have, to keep them engaged over time, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit later just about, you know, what marketing is in this particular time frame, which, you know, engagement is a huge word in it, right? Whereas in the past, I wouldn't say that it was really all about engagement, but not to the degree that it is right now, where in order to market in today's environment, you literally have to consider, how do I stay in touch with that audience 24/7 if possible? That's not how marketing was done before.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it used to be you were gathering names for your postal mailing list and you would mail them things, and maintain a relationship that's done digitally now. And if that loyalty is tangible, then you can rely on those people to come and help you with a subscription, I guess. Ted
Yes.
actually dug into this with a more refinement. What other platforms are there besides Patreon that are easy to use and free and inexpensive to be a member? I don't know the answer to that. Is that known to you?
You know what? I really haven't spent a lot of time keeping track of all the platforms. There are many of them, and they're available all over the internet, to be quite honest with you. There are many of them, and I think that folks have to look and see, okay, what suits my style, right? What is it that I want to do? Am I looking to, for example, as part of my subscription, to do a lot of self-produced streaming? Like, in other words, when people contribute with their subscription, what they're looking forward to is a concert a month, a solo concert a month, right? That I'm going to self-produce and I'm going to stream that, and that's kind of the foundation of their subscription. Or are they looking for merchandise that they're able to get some swag? Are they looking for, they're going to be involved in other facets of my life? So I know, for example, some artists who are musicians, but they're also poets, and they're also authors. They're also visual artists too. They paint, right? And so when the subscription allows people to see the painting that they produced that month, or, you know, which is outside of music, but now has given those subscribers an added value and into their life. People can be as creative as they want to be. You know what I'm going to do? Who is it that was asking about the different platforms?
Ted Peters. And I actually went and did a search while we were talking for alternatives to Patreon, and I've put in the chat the link to 12 alternatives to Patreon. So
yeah, good, thanks. I was just going to say that, you know, when I get off, I can send that, because it's very easy. I mean, the internet is loaded with a lot of you know, platforms that will allow you to do similar things. And they're being created all the time. That's why one of the things I don't do is try to keep abreast of what all those platforms are, because
Kickstarter and Indiegogo are a couple names I recognize.
Actually, yeah, a lot of people I know use Indiegogo, and I've had good results with it. But I don't want to. I mean, this presentation isn't to promote one over the other. What I'm really trying to get across is that these platforms are available, and they're available for you to peruse, have a close look, see which one jives in terms of what they're offering with what you need to do, right? Because remember, our creativity is not going to go out the door just because we're now in this sort of world of online technology. We still have to be creative in it. We still have to find the ones that are fit for the way we like to do what we want to do.
I'm seeing Sue Foley doing some very smart audience loyalty incentives, and especially around her merch. And I know Michelle Garr out of Hamilton is actually managing a lot of that for her, but having somebody managing your merch and throwing incentives out there to entice. We did that at TBS with COVID masks. All our new members who signed up in the spring for a period of time were comped a TBS mask with a logo on it, and
nice, perfect.
Just to give them a little thank you.
Yeah, perfect, exactly. And if TBS, as you know, perhaps had information about COVID, you know, gave updates with regards to, you know, because you know the government trying to get really a line on the safety. Has to keep shifting, right? You know, like we're now in lockdown again, right? So, you know, another way to go with that is to be the place for the musicians to get that information in terms of
Homa dishes a lot of information out every Wednesday in the Where It's At. There's a long list of resources, just to mention that while you're on.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to point a lot of sort of information like that people want to gather after the fact. I'm going to point them back. Hum and I had a conversation about this. I'm going to actually point them back to you, even if I have to get you the information or whatever, but I think it's a better way to look at getting people some of that, like the concrete information. What are some choices of platforms, that sort of thing. All right. So Ken, are we good? Or was there anything else that I kind of needed to clarify there?
Keep going.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So I was saying that with regards to this idea of subscriptions, there's an opportunity to reward loyalty. That's really, I think, the crux of the matter. There's an opportunity to engage, and there's an opportunity to reward loyalty, and more, those things can be used as attractors for the audience that we want to build. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that we got out of this is that these things are the subscriptions, the self-produced streaming, etc., are also opportunities that we can use in tandem when we get back to gigging and touring. We can use them as valuable ways in which to get our loyal fan base out. We can use them as ways in which to grow our fan base while we're not gigging and touring, so that when we do get back out, we now have even perhaps a greater, certainly a greater loyal base with which to leverage. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this, this thing called brand, that I think, sometimes it can be very convoluted, just in terms of, what is your brand? What does that really mean? How do you influence your brand? And so on. So first of all, in building your brand as artists, it's really in many ways about your image, your speaking style, your attire, your values, your personality, your character, the products that you create, the price that you tend to charge for those products, how you promote them, the marketplace that you function in, the audiences that you attract, et cetera, et cetera. This last one of the audiences you attract, in a way, have shaped this movement of brand towards being a product in itself, for the main reason that many of the commercial interests will want to engage in the brand that you have as a product, because they want to reach, or they want to be able to engage the audience that you command. That whole area has caused, even for musicians, a shift from the music itself being the sole product, to the music and your brand together in tandem being a product. Develop and register a trademark that epitomizes your brand, your image, your message, evolve it and protect it internationally. Too many of our musicians are actually evolving strong brands, but never quite gaining the benefit of that brand. In other words, they're dissipating the opportunity that they've spent a lot of years actually evolving. Perhaps they didn't think of it as brand when they were evolving it, but their audiences certainly did. Decide and agree who owns and controls the brand. So, for example, in the case of a band, if you are the leader of the band, as you know, bands or artists, there's a plethora of dynamics. We can't necessarily go through all of them, but decide on who owns, be very clear is what I'm trying to say, in terms of who owns and controls the brand. Is it the band? Is it the leader? Is it the songwriter, right, whose material we're doing? Or all of us as songwriters, musicians, et cetera, all of those things should be decided and understood by everybody involved. Consider creating a holding company strictly for the purposes of owning and controlling your intellectual property rights and your publicity. Okay, that's what that does, is allow there to be an entity that is strictly there for the business of negotiating around the brand, negotiating around your intellectual property, which is, you know, all of those things that are wrapped up in your ability to do what you do as artists, as, you know, musicians, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, when someone wants to negotiate with regards to your brand, someone realizes, you know what, we'd really like to make this artist and that genre of music that the artist is involved in doing, we'd really like to make that a part of our thrust moving forward with regards to marketing and feel of a product or something like that. That's not necessarily something that many artists want to negotiate or be involved with as part of their day-to-day musical activity. So create a holding company. The holding company can engage lawyers whenever they need to, engage all of the expertise they need to in order to be able to negotiate the intellectual property rights, etc.
Quammie, are you talking about a legalized incorporation, or are you talking about a self-proprietorship?
To be quite honest with you, it could be either.
Right, but it's the both in terms of incorporating and then in terms of continuing to maintain that legal structure is fairly expensive, relatively speaking, for most independent musicians.
Yes, you would only make it a private incorporated company if you're functioning at that level in terms of the revenues that are possible and so on and so. If it's a single artist, for example, then what I would say is, you know, create a holding company that in itself is a sole proprietorship, or maybe the holding company is a partnership between you and your spouse, but the idea here being that rather than involving your own music business in the negotiation about those kind of brand rights, it might be better to have a holding company that will own and be able to negotiate. So the holding company will actually own the brand. And then you can do business along that line that is not necessarily the same as, you know, when you're negotiating for studio time or something.
Kwame, I'm going to ask for a further clarification along the lines of what Ken asked, because holding company is not a term I am using in my work, but this registration idea I threw into the chat that registration would make you eligible at Ontario Creates, because they were requiring, as opposed to being a collective or an individual artist, registered companies representing an artist. And there's a great example in the blues community. Steve Strongman went in successfully to Ontario Creates and got some serious funding through a business plan and a registration that they have. And Ontario Creates has really opened up this area. But what is a holding company? What is the difference between that and just registering as a sole proprietor or incorporating? Which,
right.
I don't think it is actually that expensive, by the way.
Yeah, well, what he was getting at is that if you're going to sort of incorporate a whole new business, a private incorporation costs a bit of money. Like, it's not, you know, it's not that expensive. But that's why I say you would have to leverage that decision according to the revenues that are possible, et cetera, et cetera. But what I mean by a holding company is this, right? It's really more, if you think of it more as a legal function than necessarily an artistic function. Okay, so what you just described in terms of, I remember the name you said, but what he did was in terms of leveraging the funds that he got, like those are opportunities that everybody should try to maximize. But that's really forming an artistic company, right? An artistic company that will say, hey, look, you know what? I have these ideas. Here's my business plan for how I'm going to market this cultural product that we're creating, etc. That's an artistic company. What I'm talking about is a company for the purposes of legal negotiation that has a legal ownership of your brand, so that when it comes to negotiating according to your brand, those discussions can take place in a fairly uncluttered environment, right? So the person or people or whoever who is going to negotiate with regards to the brand rights are negotiating with a company whose sole purpose is to negotiate with regards to your brand, and it doesn't get cluttered with anything else for that matter. It's really a legal entity that you own, but that legal entity owns your brand. So for example, do you remember that Prince, right, had sold his trademark as part of his record deal to his record company? And so when he fell out of sorts with them because they wanted to control, you know, all of the masters and everything, they said, well, you know what? We own Prince. That name, that brand, Prince, we own that. So you can't even use your own name, which now is a brand. And so what Prince's response at the time was to say, okay, I am now creating another brand, and it's called the artist formerly known as. Because he's so recognizable, everybody knew what he meant. The artist formerly known as Prince, okay. Which was really clever on his part. But what he did was he created another brand and then created a company that would own that brand. Ultimately, he owned the company, but I'm saying he would create another company that will own that new brand. So no record company that he dealt with before could lay claim to that brand. It was held by another company. So all I'm talking about is a holding company is a company that will hold on to rights in order to negotiate around those rights in a way that provides an unobstructed ability to control simply the rights. And in this case, it's the brand rights.
Prince obviously was a multimillionaire, and that was a different level of negotiation. And for framing the Steve Strongman example that I brought up, that category of funding at Ontario Creates, which, for many people, when it first opened up, was formidable and intimidating, was $50,000 that you're trading. I can't remember specifically where that applied, whether it was gross or net or exactly what it was, because the other categories are for the record companies and trade associations where there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars involved. But for artists, the threshold is at that lower level, but registration was one of the things that was required. And it's an area that, having seen Steve Strongman be successful, I've been encouraging people to look at in the event, because I would think that Ken's operations at Pyramid or the studio and the many things that he does would qualify. Most of the small and independent labels do qualify. But getting back to the brand and the registration point, Ted is representing Blackburn, which is a collective of, a pile of musicians. And I'm not sure if he's here today because of them specifically, but
Yeah.
you have multiple composers, you have, multiple people underneath an umbrella with a band name. At the Junos, this is a big deal because you're either an individual or you're a group. And when it comes down to some things about how you register, the difference is, okay, Ted is here solo.
Since Ted's here, Ted, so when you so I would say that Blackburns, right? Here we have basically a second or third generation musical family in Ontario, right? I would say that their brand is probably very strong. Not so sure how much business you're doing just with regards to the brand of the Blackburns, right? Are they seeking that brand for commercials? Are they seeking that brand to be the face of anything? Ted?
Oh, so yeah, I'm here. Here's what I'll say is I can't speak for the band. I have my own opinions on them, on everything, of course. I mean, as a member of the band, what I would say is it's definitely a family thing, 100%. It's the lineage with their dad, with their great-great-grandfather, with the Underground Railroad and their journey here, and to what's brought them to where they are. From a branding perspective with that, that's you couldn't ask for a better brand.
Exactly.
But they do things the way that they want to do it, and they align themselves with a lot of emancipation, Black history societies like the Ontario Black History Society, Halton Region, Voices of Freedom, things that really do align with their ideals, their values, and also the music that we play.
Right.
So, but beyond that, hey, I'll leave my 2 cents up here.
Okay, so fair enough. So the only reason I asked about the Blackburns is because I happen to think that they're a very strong brand, and so further to that. So for example, in what I'm describing with regards to holding company, right? It wouldn't be changing the Blackburns musical unit or even the way in which they function, which I know is very family and so on. So, but what I'm saying is, if it were that the Blackburn as a brand started to take off and there became a need to negotiate for that brand. In other words, if that brand now got to the point where it actually had the potential of generating more revenue than even them playing music, right? Which is kind of one of the things that I'm talking about is this whole, we live in a world now where, the brand plus the music can supersede just the music in terms of revenue, right? And so what I'm saying is, if it gets to the point where people are looking for, they want them to appear in a commercial with Bobby Dean or, you know what I mean? Whatever. Okay. If it starts to get to that point, what I'm saying is that rather than with whatever your musical entity is, trying to negotiate the rights around that brand now, right? I'm saying a good idea is to create a holding company, and that holding company will actually own the rights to the brand. They're not necessarily involved in the music or involved in all the other family endeavors, but they would own the rights to the brand. And so when a television station, a producer comes calling and wants to use the Blackburn brand for this or that or the other, who's negotiating with them is the holding company.
Who controls the holding company?
The holding company can be owned by in the case of the Blackburns, by the family itself.
Right. I mean, I've actually done some business on behalf of the band. It was actually directly with one of the labels, Lance Anderson's label, and I did some work. And they, you know, but your idea, I think I'm getting that, you know, what if there was a Blackburn TV show and
Right.
there needed to be a contract, you know, Brooke and Dwayne and whomever is in the leadership would have to have set things up in such a way that they are contacted and control the direction, as opposed to Lance or Andrew Galloway or somebody else who's
Thank you.
the label.
You got it. You got it. That's it. You got it. You got it. Yeah,
I'm muting
the
myself.
idea. The other thing is that we as artists, when we're moving into these realms, we have to understand that legal advice is not optional. Okay, because we're now navigating worlds where your revenue is based on a set of very complex terms that legal advice is needed. Legal experts are needed. You know, there's a big difference between that and negotiating with the club owner, you know, for whatever the fee might be, you know, and so plus I'll take a percentage of the bar. Okay, when we're talking about the opportunities that exist now, there has to be, especially with regards to brand, because brand means somebody is going to take that celebrity, that trademark that you've developed, and use it as a commodity. Okay? And so what that means is that it could be used in many, many different ways, according to whatever you feel comfortable with. But nevertheless, I'm saying it means that your brand may be in different businesses. Your brand may be utilized in different businesses, right? Somebody who you know, sorry to use the Blackburns again, but somebody who wants to sort of do something with regards to African liberation, okay, may choose that brand as the face of, you know, of their documentary or something like that. That's a whole another level. Or as well as it may be, you know, epitomize rural farming, whatever. Like, you know, people could be as creative as they want in terms of all it has to be is that the audience that the group has or that the individual has, that they perceive that audience is the one they want to engage, and then all kinds of opportunities are possible. Right? So my point here is that because of the complexity, legal advice has to be a must. It has to be almost accounted for and built in to all of the approaches. And the last point that I made really is kind of what I'm trying to say in the last point, which is know your fans, know who's loyal to you, know who supports you, know your market, because companies will pay you in order to engage them. So one role that musicians and artists play is as a conduit between entities, some of them commercial or many of them commercial, and audience.
Quammie, this is a bit of a micro tangent perhaps, but I have a website and I get approached by people who say they want to advertise on my website. They want access to the people who come to my website because I have a brand. My company is called Global Cafe,
Yep.
So it attracts people who are looking, but it always feels like a scam that somebody wants to access my not so high profile website.
Right. I have to say, it may only feel like a scam because of the fact that, we're a little bit old school, right? But this is a very commonplace way of doing business nowadays, because people are looking to utilize whoever they can, whichever entity they can, in order to engage and to reach an audience. And if they perceive that your audience is the same one that they want to reach, or there are intersectionalities of those audiences, they will approach you. Because the idea being, you know what, the way it's evolving is actually in some ways what many of us used to ask for, right? Which is, let's not all compete. If together we can reach triple the audience, then we all do better. And that's it has been the culture that has grown with this ability to reach audiences in the virtual platform. Somebody said it's about very fundamental concern about how we work together. Absolutely.
But Ken, who preceded that with a reference to, what if you don't agree with capitalism as a model that should be engaging your art?
Right. So I mean, listen, I would say that, and I would say that, I actually live my life in a way that didn't or tried to engage capitalism the least that I could, right? It's one of the reasons that I kind of live outside of the urban center, and I try to engage community as much as possible. But that's a good point. Like, I would say that not all of these tools, etc., are for everybody, because some of them, and what they're being used for are rooted in capitalism. There's no doubt about that. But I always say that those of us who are not big supporters of capitalism, for example, those tools are evolving. Okay, so it's a question of how we creatively utilize those opportunities in order sometimes to even critique the system, or to create opportunities that don't necessarily buy into the capitalism, or in some cases the commercialism and so on. So as a matter of fact, if I like the way I envision it right now, in terms of my perception of what's going on, is that these tools are being created because the people who have commercial interests have a lot more resources to manipulate the tools than some of us do. If we're not careful, they will actually manipulate everything about how the tool is used. And that's not new. That's really not new. That's been going on. I remember a time when it costs, $50,000 to make an album. And I was in a band who, we were struggling and saving our money and all kinds of stuff, because we didn't want to engage the capitalist sort of mechanism that was the recording industry. We wanted to do it independently. And it took us years to produce one album, because of the fact that, so my point, Ken, is that we're not really, that hasn't shifted, right? It's still true that, the tools that are there are going to be manipulated as much as possible by capitalist interests, unless those of us who want to do something different figure out creative ways to use them. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
But there, we only have a few more minutes, Quammie.
Yeah, I'm gonna. The discussion has been, very. So I'm gonna go through quickly, and then we can have a little bit of a chat. Okay. So essentially, the Canadian recording music industry in 2018 had revenues of about $400 million. Okay. there are opportunities for collecting revenue based on just brand, okay? Appearance fees for performance or appearance at corporate branding events, sales of artist branded products, sales of merchandise with co-branded names, ad buys, co-brand, goodwill created for artists, free products from brand partners. With regards to radio play, I think that it's about networking. It's I think we could pay to distribute our music to radio stations through DMDS like Yangaroo. We could hire radio promoters with proven connections. We could self-distribute, go to stations, email them, do everything possible to contact program directors, general managers, etc. But because if we're thinking of the Canadian context, it is still true that the CanCon rules have really helped local Canadian artists, and composers, and so on to be able to compete. There's no question about that. Please make sure that you get your tracking done. You can send your song to info to encoding@mediabase.com. Mediabase will actually track and produce data analytics on where your song is being played, et cetera, et cetera. The digital media distribution system operating in Canada is Yangaroo. They have actually a sort of a customized list, if you like. So if you're in a particular format, they will actually customize your package so that you get out your stuff to all those radio stations that are playing that particular format and so on. The requirements are fairly simple. This really, I would say, circumvents a lot of the issues that we happened for generations and generations, where there was always unclear as to how you get your stuff played on the radio and so on. Not so sure that that's all gone, but I do know that this allows for there to be an ongoing process of everybody having opportunities to get their product on the radio. The requirements, as I said, are simple. You have to have a WAV file. You have all the information, data, ISRC codes. Now, with regards to distribution, in 2018, CD sales revenue in Canada was about 42 million. Music downloads revenue was about 79 million, and music streaming 343 million. So that alone should give us a signal as to what's actually going on and where the opportunities may be in terms of generating revenue from our music. And now some people are not going to necessarily want to engage in this at all, and that's fine. But I'm saying, since we're talking about sustainability of musicians and artists, I think that we need to consider where most of the funds are being generated, and then we need to position ourselves accordingly. Some companies are still in the physical distribution business, whilst distributing digitally. There's more sector growth in the digital distribution market. There's your CD Babies, your DistroKid, Reverb Nation, TuneCore, Ditto. One of the downfalls is that the larger foreign distributors are not likely to observe CanCon rules, and it's harder to enforce, like your Napsters and your Netflix and so on. I think most people are probably familiar with CD Babies, so I won't spend. Okay, Bill, so you'll tell me in a second what that painful question is. I just gave CD Baby as an example. I'm not promoting one over the other or anything like that, but just to show how it works, for those people who may not be familiar. They offer digital distribution, streaming, physical distribution, etc. The key things about this is that they will pay royalties. They will pay, thanks, Ted. Ted is putting in the chat I guess it's the cost of playing on most platforms. They'll cover song licensing. You get reporting in terms of how your product is doing, professional publishing, administration, etc. So these are sort of oh sorry okay yeah, these are sort of can I say sort of packages that help to simplify what you need to do and kind of put it all in a bundle, and you pay for it and so on. So the company will collect and distribute mechanical fees and sync fees on behalf of composers and publishers as well, and that's important. I guess the underlying theme of all of this is that many of us are leaving revenue on the table, okay, by not engaging in these opportunities and so on. And so in order to promote more sustainability, I'm suggesting that we diversify the way we disseminate our music. Okay, creators and publishers' rights, performing rights organizations, collect them, so can collect digital and audio identification, use the digital and audio identification, and then collect royalties for distribution for members and so on. This copyright area, if there's some interest in it, I know we're scanning it very quickly now, but if there's some interest in this, what I might do is take some time in another one of the sessions and actually cover copyright, because I think it's very important and often a very misunderstood area of our business, and more extremely important with regards to the collection of revenues. Okay, so I guess at the very basic level, there are the creators and publishers' rights. There are the what are called the neighboring rights, which is the rights of the performance on a recording, and the labels who may have owned the master, etc., and so on. So yeah, you know what, Derek, I think what I'll do is, because I don't feel comfortable skimming this like this. So what I'll do is maybe on another one of the sessions, I will go over I'll go over copyright again. Okay. And of course, there's a fee that is collected for private copying, and that's collected by the CPCC. And essentially, it's a levy that is on all blank CDs that is distributed. Right? CD manufacturers and importers, blank audio materials, etc. There's a fee that they leverage is ordered to compensate us for the fact that people use these and copy our music. Also want to talk about In Tandem, a joint venture between SOCAN and Resound that helps to simplify the licensing of music for Canadian businesses like restaurants and so on that use music as part of their business model. Also want to point you to a Digital Millennium Copyright Act that governs some of the larger commercial media interests like YouTube and so on, in order to ensure proper compensation to artists. Marketing. Okay, I'm going to talk about this a little bit here. So marketing is a set of strategies, principles, etc., that help to maximize the revenue to be gained from the selling of your musical product and service. Okay, so the foundations of marketing really are the product, the people and the businesses that are fit for your product, the ones that will consume it, the promotion needed to make your product attractive to them, the price that you will charge for your product, the places that your product will be accessed by the people who desire it. In the case of the places, we mean, of course, it could be physical places, but nowadays it could be virtual places as well. The trends, brand has joined music to create a new product that involves your brand and your music. The public desire to have music without fees changing the sources of revenue. In other words, we got into a tailspin here where people are expecting to have music for free. That certainly has changed the landscape greatly. Artists will be forced to diversify their dissemination mix, or risk their sustainability. CanCon may be unable to provide ongoing protection for Canadian musical products as we are entering this particularly global world. Royalties will play a significant role in artist sustainability. The pandemic having a devastating effect on revenues from live performances, as we discussed. With regards to marketing in the digital realm, there's a shifting paradigm that's driven, of course, by technological advancement and the rapid rate in which that's taking place. We are now in a global village with new and changing channels to a variety of audiences. We have to create a unique brand that will be noticed because of the flood of opportunities that are there for everybody to actually talk to your audience. We have to reach traditional fans while still attracting new fans. The use of algorithms can be very instrumental in that regard. Interactivity is the key. I repeat it again. If you remember nothing else from this presentation, it is that interactivity is the key. When it comes to marketing, interactivity is the key. Personalization, digital storytelling, virtual reality, interactive album art. I've seen some very interesting approaches to album art that are highly interactive, you know, where the album art itself is almost like a world you enter into and so on. Generate revenue from your fan base while still playing music authentically. Okay, so streaming as a promotional tool and revenue generator. So we talked a little bit about that. I won't go into that. So let's continue the conversation. I want to thank Derek and Amma at the Toronto Blues Society. I want to thank my colleague Valerie Hathaway Warner, who is at the Ontario Musicians Cooperative Incorporated. She's someone who I always, you know, I have a lot of discussions with her with regards to what's going on in music. Any comments, questions?
Quammie, I put in the chat that Ted had to leave, but that we have recorded today and it'll be available. Maybe Huma could come back in and just clarify how people can find this session in the future and other sessions that are coming up. If Huma's still listening.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I just
Yeah,
cut off.
Huma is there.
Yeah. So thank you so much everyone for joining. This session will be uploaded to TBS YouTube channel as well as the other 3 upcoming sessions. So please make sure to enroll and register for the next 3 Zoom sessions as well. There you can all find those links on our website, social media. And if you have any questions or need more, like further detail or anything, you know, if you need to know more and need more resources, just make sure to contact us. I'll just write my email address here to info@TorontoBluesSociety.com. So if you get your inquiries there, I will make sure to, you know, connect you with Rudi Quammie or direct you to the right resources that you're looking for. And I think that's it. Anyone else has any questions? Any recommendations? Anything?
I mean, maybe you could just pull the screen off, or so we can go gallery or whatever. But I've never heard of the organization you just posted, the Ontario Musicians Cooperative. So I've learned something today. What is that?
So the Ontario Musicians Cooperative is based in Barrie, Ontario. And it's run by a woman named Valerie Hathaway Warner. and they're doing some amazing work with regards to sort of nurturing a next gen of musicians and encouraging musicianship and live music playing and so on. They do it from a very grassroots perspective. One of the biggest programs they have actually takes young people from all over the country and brings them to Barrie, usually for months during the summertime, where they will actually work on music. Some of them will play on the street as part of the street musician program. But in addition to that, they actually learn a lot of the music craft, if you like, and so on. So since I've been up in the region, as you know, I live up near Barrie, Valerie Warner of OMCI is somebody who, you know, we're always talking. So I couldn't not acknowledge, you know, that some of the conversations we have, you know, have stimulated a lot of my ideas and thoughts around this whole idea of dissemination of music. And so on.
Cool. Well, maybe TBS can help them. Some of what we're talking about today will get covered again in not just the sessions that we've got you speaking on, but our conference, which is scheduled for January of 22, often incorporates a lot of professional development and topics that we've touched on today. So hopefully that will be a physical event at the Chelsea Hotel. But we've got a few bridges to cross before we get to that. And you are helping stimulate the conversation. So Hooman, you want to just repeat that access to this info for people, and we'll keep broadcasting this, of course, in our tools.
Exactly. So next Sunday and the next 3 Sundays will be here on Zoom. And the registration info can be found on our website and social media as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to just reach out to me from that email that I just put on the chat.
So on the 25th, do we have 2 sessions? Because that's also the day of the Jody Drake video, yes?
That's
April
correct.
20th.
That will be a stream, not an interactive video like this. But
People will be on their laptop all day.
Is it a documentary on Jody?
Yeah, it's a
gonna be
live
yeah.
a performance that she did at Toronto Jazz Festival that we found and transferred from VHS to digital. And David Bernard was the MC that day, and he'll make some remarks and set up the session. But yeah, she was in the tent. She had a TV show at CBC many moons ago, but this is rare footage that we're going to share. And Brian Blaine, who's in his backyard from the looks of the screen, helped.
There's a little 10-minute mini interview with Jody as she was talking to a couple of her fans backstage that day, 1995. It's fascinating.
Wow, amazing. Excellent.
Thanks, Quammie.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And as I said, I think what I'm going to do, I don't feel like, you know, we kind of ran out of time a bit there, but what I might do is when we do one of the other ones, like even next Sunday, what I'll do is I'll bring back the copyright discussion, because I think that I'll find a place, you know, to really try and do it.
Super.
I'm trying to find the things that, you know, as part of my philosophy of the fact that we need to diversify our revenue streams. I think we're leaving a lot of money on the table with regards to royalties. Is my message, and yeah, if we can help people to do that.
Cool. Patrick is sitting in a lovely valley there. I thought that was a photo of him, but then he moved. So clearly, that's a green.
There is some movement.
So like Patrick, Ken, Brian, was that helpful?
I thought it was. Yes, quite interesting.
Okay.
Thanks.
We've got a new club opening up here, and we're working on a blues society locally. So any of these things related will be helpful for myself as well as bands that we're going to be working with.
Okay.
Where are you living, Patrick?
Halliburton. And there's no blues society in the belly of the province, so we're going to try to do something.
Good.
Get something started here.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think that it's a real dilemma because my focus of what I want to do is create art,
Yeah.
not to figure out the best way to maximize revenue streams.
Right.
And so it's kind of a dilemma. Like until the pandemic hit, I had someone who came into my house two times a week and ran my office and dealt with a lot of all that stuff that I don't want to deal with.
Right.
And then, you know, so then she hasn't, you know, she has done a few things for me, but basically hasn't been working for me since the pandemic. And so I found that I'm making less money, but I'm spending less money and I'm still making art. And am I happier doing it that way? Or do I want to see this disseminated more widely, the art that I'm making, to those people who would like to you know, Ian Bell, a folk artist, had a great line one time where, you know, I hope that people who like this kind of thing find this the kind of thing they like. And so, but it's about the finding part. How do people find it? And so that is the challenge. And you know, subscriptions, I mean, that's certainly, you know, we spend maybe a little more time than you expected on that, but that's something to think about, you know, it's because, and the idea that, as you wanted to emphasize, interactions. So, you know, like it gives us an opportunity to really create an ongoing relationship with people, which when I look at it in those terms, then I feel more comfortable than selling ads on my YouTube channel.
Oh, no, absolutely. So I get, you know, what I'm saying, Ken, is this, right? So we have all this, you know, we have especially the generation that we were in, right?
Yeah.
Of these, you know, people who, you know, develop virtuoso ability. They spend a lot of time on their craft. They, you know, they kept alive cultural musical traditions that were 100 years old. You see what I mean? And I feel very strongly about the sustainability of those people. And so the thing is, if people are going to be pushed into a situation where doing the music itself is no longer sustainable in terms of them being able to make a living, or, you know, and they're going to be forced to do other things outside of music that they don't necessarily want to do, but they have to do in order to eat and, you know, feed their families and so on. I'm saying if that's the case, I would much prefer to introduce them to opportunities to consider a dissemination mix that still involves music.
Sure.
And that's really my point. It's not, you know, I'm not looking for, you know, I myself, I'm not like that. I'm not looking for people to sort of decide tomorrow that they're just going to commercialize the hell out of everything. That's not it. And that, for in our community anyway, that has never really been it, right?
Yeah.
You know, most of us, like you articulated, are looking to find ways to do what we do, to do what we love. You know, I you know, listen, right now, sometimes I'm almost giving away, you know, what I know how to do. I'm almost giving it away sometimes for the mere idea that, you know, there's some folks, especially young people, that I want to inspire. I want to inspire them to consider the work and the virtuosity that it takes to become good at these instruments, or become good at this kind of music, to really understand it and so on. But
I'm curious what any of the other people whose are only names on the screen for me, I mean, some of the names are names I've recognized, but but if anybody else wants to weigh in, because I feel like Derek and I have talked, and you've talked, obviously, but I'm just curious if anyone else here has things they want to say.
So Bill,
Yeah.
how you
Can
doing,
you
Bill?
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
First of all, can you see me though? Maybe I should put the
I
camera
can't
on
see you. It would be great to
Exactly.
see you.
Exactly. I should have the courtesy of let's see if this works.
There you go. Do
That's
you
it.
guys know
Not the
Bill?
greatest image, but
Maybe
I
maybe
know
I can.
Bill. Hi,
You know
man.
Bill?
oh yeah, of course.
All right.
Is that Bill?
We have known
Extreme
Brian
French?
for decades.
Yes.
Great player, great newsletter. I always read your newsletters very, very closely.
Likewise.
It's always good content in them. Yeah. I'm sorry. So just frame a question, and I'll try and respond. Quammie, go ahead.
No, no. I was going to say I'm very interested in you know, from kind of the practice that you've had, where you sit with all this, you know, what we're
Okay.
talking about.
Well, I guess my circumstance is a little bit different than many of the people
That's
here.
why I'm asking you.
Exactly. So, I'm as some of you may know, I'm a jazz Latin flautist and essentially a freelancer. So my circumstance is different. I usually am hired by people, a bit of a hired gun to dress or be a sideman, and I kind of like that that operating milieu because it constantly changes, and I get to play in different idioms. And I guess it saves me the problems of being a leader. But in any event, a lot of the content here is geared towards, say, bands, as opposed to myself, who I'm a freelance flautist. So I'm learning a lot, but in regards to things that I might not necessarily do myself or are not entirely relevant because I function as a freelancer more than as a band leader or as an act independent.
So one of the things I think, Bill, you might be able to help us with. So are you still working for the federal government, Bill?
No.
No, you
No,
retired?
I got the painter early on that, and you pay a price for that because I thought I'd be relatively busy musically, and I didn't get that busy musically. But COVID, now it's like almost nothing.
Right.
So,
So the reason what I was hoping you would comment on, Bill,
okay, go ahead.
is really because you have functioned both as kind of somebody pursuing your musical endeavors and your musical career while still working in a significant job at something else, right? I know you've done that, and you've also functioned as somebody doing music solely, right?
Right.
So one of the things that we're talking about here, one of the things that is impacted by it is, so the musicians now who are functioning and who are looking at live playing perhaps changing, or in some cases drying up, depending on where you are. What I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, as somebody who has lived both of those things, both the musician who has a day job, let's put it that way, or the musician who is like, no, this is what I do, etc., etc. And that means perhaps in some cases a change in revenue, a change perhaps in lifestyle, etc. But I think that's something that a lot of people who've only lived by music have to think about how we're going to navigate in light of what I'm saying, which is if I'm going to be pushed into doing other things as a job that don't support my musical endeavor, would I prefer to diversify my revenue stream and look at these other opportunities that may have royalties and so on associated with it? Or do I want to stay with, sort of the gigging and touring thing, and get another job as part of that?
Well, one suggestion I can make here based on my own experience, and it might be an idea for everyone to look at this hard, because it was a real surprise to me. I wrote a book in late 1919, or published it in 1919. So the revenues started to flow from that in the first 3 months of 2020, just before COVID hit. And what was really interesting about that book, because it's actually very, very well written, it's a really good book, but the revenues from that 3-month interval exceeded anything in my entire career of music combined. So in the 3 months, I made more from the sales of that book than I ever did recording, gigging, teaching,
Wow.
CD sales, everything. And now, of course, I was absolutely astonished because I see myself as a performer, not an author. So what I learned from that, and I really encourage you all, is have a hard look at what skill sets that you might have that are maybe not directly related to playing, see, that you might be able to exploit or utilize. Because as I say, writing that book was the smartest thing I ever did. Sir James Galway was asking me to do this 15 years ago, but I was busy enough. I just didn't have time for it. But I finally got around to it, and lo and behold, as I say, it's had the most brilliant return on it of my entire musical career, both in terms of sort of recognition and feedback from critics, academics, students, and so forth. That's another thing I like to do is teach, although revenue from teaching is very ad hoc and episodic. But in any event, what I'm driving at is have a look at your skill sets. Because in my case, I did a lot of writing in my former life, and that really helped me in crafting the book. So I came up with a very good product, but I had a result that I never, ever anticipated. So there you go.
Right. So I mean, thank you for sharing that, Bill. Now what I'm saying is, okay, in a sense, it's in the same vein, which is as part of, so Bill is talking about, he did something that he had done perhaps previously, et cetera, et cetera. It found a market. Good. Okay. What I'm saying is that even within our lives as musicians and the skill sets that we have in terms of just doing what we like, producing music, I'm saying, look, let's look at the actual opportunities that abound from that act of producing music. And there are many, many more than I think we're generally looking at right now.
I might just qualify here, Quammie, because that book that I wrote is entitled The Technique and Theory of Improvisation. So I just took all my
so it's
everything I knew
exactly
musically. So it's music.
my point. My
Yep,
point.
exactly.
My point exactly. My point
So
exactly.
I never have expected, but there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means
Sorry,
that,
Ken, you got to unmute yourself.
Oh yeah.
Bill, what is the book called?
It's called The Technique and Theory of Improvisation, and it's that's like a subtitle, a practical guide for flautists, doublers, and other instrumentalists. It's actually a very good book. I managed to.
It's a good book. I've seen
when
it.
I started writing it, I thought it might be about 200 pages, but I basically was able to tell everything I know in 150 pages. So it's very concise and very well organized. And it's not strictly for flute players. It's for anybody who's.
And Bill, I have to say, is one of the best improvisers I have ever heard.
Indeed. We need more flute in the blues.
Yeah, more. You know something? I should post a notice somewhere. You guys know, because that's the whole idea. It's really effective. As a matter of fact, that's a good idea. You've given me an idea. Thanks, Ken. And
yeah. So
I've
anyway,
said enough. We should hear from somebody else.
Yeah. So just to, I mean, in a sense, Bill, what you've described is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Which is, we all have to look at the opportunities to diversify. We learned a particular craft, we do it well, okay, but that craft in itself now has many arms, if you like, and artists should be encouraged to look at the possibilities from those arms. We named a few today that have just to do with the music product itself, in terms of recorded music.
Mhm.
But as you were saying, there are other things as well. And not only that too, but that one of the things that you're not necessarily recognizing yet, Bill, is that when you do that, what happens now is that your brand has elevated,
Mhm.
right? So now when people think about Bill McBurney, it's not just the improvising flautist.
Mhm.
It's the, there's a certain brand that comes from the fact that you wrote that book on improvisation, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. So your brand now, when, in the future, people may say, well, okay, you know what, let's have Bill comment in this documentary because his brand
Mhm.
is of value to us and so on. That has a whole value in itself, and it comes from the exploration of all of these opportunities, right?
Mhm.
I mean, yeah.
Gotcha.
Say, Kwame, one thing I would say about your audience for this one and the upcoming sessions, though, is probably I'm feeling like a lot of the things you were talking about today were above my pay grade. If you were going to compare this to the corporate world, we are a cottage industry, and a lot of the things that I was seeing on those flashcards, I just think non-applicable, in my situation. Ken Whiteley is another a level of stature, and Bill, but I think you're going to be talking mostly to people that are cottage industry artists, and I'm not likely to be hiring lawyers, not even Paul Sanderson,
Right. So that's one of the difficulties of trying to kind of put something together to meet the needs of such a diverse group. So, like after this session, then I have a better idea of who's likely to engage, right? So I will, I'm glad for that feedback. That's great because what I'll try to do is to make it a little bit more palatable to, somebody who is perhaps not thinking about all of those things yet. But I want to say one thing though, which is that um, it is important, I think, for us to continue to expand our horizons with regards to these possibilities because sometimes they're not as they're not as unreachable as might be, just to use Bill as an example. So prior to writing that book on improvisation, right? If someone had said, well, he said, somebody tried me to get me to write something like that 15 years before. It's like they're busy, right? But it has been a significant source of revenue that probably is going to allow Bill to do a whole bunch of other things musically that he may have had to think about. How am I actually going to do this, given the need for revenue and so on and so. So what I'm describing is that, if we have a little bit of a thought process that involves some increased possibilities, and one of the reasons I'm saying this is that look, we now have, because of the virtual world, we now have dissemination possibilities that we couldn't possibly have years ago, right? Like now, it's very easy for you, Brian, to create music that somebody in Russia is going to be like, have you heard Brian? Like, you know what I mean?
I
That is
just mailed a CD to Russia.
yeah.
But
And, I-
and
and
you're right. There has been a leveling of the playing field, isn't it
yep,
interesting?
yep,
People that are right up there in the stratosphere are now in their living room with a guitar on the Zoom, connecting with their fans. There might be,
yep,
400 or 500 in their case, and in our case, maybe 40 or 50. But it's
exactly.
they're going through the same challenge.
That's correct. And the thing is, there's also an opportunity there to understand how it fits into the diversified mix of things. So that the folks right now who use this time to actually engage and build and even increase audience size online, those people are going to have more people to come and see them if we go back out or when we go back out to live performances, right? If I'm able to engage online and, you know, build up, strengthen my fan base and increase the amount of people who are interested in what I do and so and so, now when I start performing again, I've been marketing to these people, right? I can engage them in another way and offer them opportunities to come to the gig and get something else, you know, some added value as well. Wayne, what are you saying? Just unmute yourself. You have to unmute, Wayne. I still can't hear you.
There we go. How about now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm a little late to the party. I'll watch this on the YouTube later. This looks like a great discussion I've been missing, so I'll pick up on it later. And I'm signed up for the whole every Sunday for the next coming, so maybe I'll remember to come on a little earlier next time.
Yep.
Anyway, this looks like a great discussion.
Yeah, so, you know, as I said, one of the things I'm going to try and find a way to fit in again is really the discussion about copyright. Just because at the core of this not leaving those revenue streams on the table is understanding of copyright, right? Because people are not signing up for all of the opportunities available, and they're not maximizing the opportunities that are available with regards to royalties and so and so. You know, there are about 16 different rights that occur when you create a piece of music or you compose something, etc. And they all have, you know, some of them are, you know, some of them are one time, like the, you know, the sync rights. They're paid one time. You know, if somebody wants to use your song or whatever in a documentary they're making or for a TV show, the sync rights are one time. But there's some rights that are repeating every time there is a play, every, you know, and so on and so. So there's cumulatively quite an opportunity that I think often we're leaving. Something blows up, it becomes used a few times, you know, it's streamed a lot or something. Well, the ability for revenue increases greatly. Whereas if we don't engage those things, those are not revenue streams that we have any possibility of. So in a sense, you know, we have to bring the creativity that we have in our performance, in our composition, etc. We have to bring that creativity to diversifying the way in which we disseminate the art we create. That is the message.
Quammie, I'll just maybe suggest we close and comment that in my experience with the blues community, we've actually had to kind of drag a lot of musicians kicking and screaming to the notion of professional development. We've made the registration fees for the Blues Summit very low, less than any other conference that I see in the folk or other rock worlds. So we're working towards that, and it is disappointing that people are not more engaged in the business side of their work. But as Ken says, a lot of people just kind of want to stay close to their creative and let some of the revenue generation happen through the systems that exist. But I think these systems need to be reviewed, and thank you for helping us walk through them, and we'll get back to the copyright and some other things later on.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Listen, you know, I mean, you guys know me, so you know, I love what we do. I love, you know, I've given a whole life to music, and like many of you, and I really, really want to see us be able to turn the corner, you know, in terms of maximizing. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope to see you next Sunday, 2:00, same time.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ciao.